Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rising Stories podcast. I'm your host, Corrine Sandifer. On Rising Stories, we meet women who work their businesses and follow their dreams. They are changing their world. They share stories about their journey and their struggles along the way. We will also talk about our best business practices here and about our favorite apps and everything else in between. We will also sneak in some tips to help you be more productive. I also share more information on Instagram and Facebook, so I'd love for you to connect with me there. I'm at Corrine Sandifer on both. On today's show, I am talking with the VP of Salesforce, Rosie Roca. Rosie and I talk about her journey from moving to the States as a young girl from Cuba to being accepted to Harvard and then getting her MBA from Stanford. Her journey story is one you don't want to miss. Rosie also shares her 3 pivotal messages to women who are looking for more opportunities in work, in school, and in life. But before we get started, I want to mention that today's podcast has been sponsored by one of our listeners, Maybelline Plessick. She is an engineer manager and is also a leader in the Lean In movement. She's leading men and women towards greater understanding and what it means to be a leader. Thank you so much, Maybelline, for helping empower women with Rising Stories podcast. If you would like to be a sponsor, please message me on Facebook or Instagram, or you can connect with me at CorrineSandifer.com. And now here is my conversation with Rosie Roca. Hi, Rosie. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks for having me.
I love what you do and what you stand for, and we met at the Lean In conference, and I was like, I've got to have her on the show. She's so interesting. I loved your talk and the things that you shared with our group, and of course, I'm all about empowering women as well, and I know you are too. So thanks so much for coming on and telling more of your story with us.
Of course, happy to be here.
Yeah. So tell me how you landed, I guess, give me some background story of where you grew up and how you got started, and you ended up going to Harvard.
I did, yes. So I was born and raised in Cuba. My family lived in Havana for the first 12 years of my life, but in fact, my roots are in farming country in Cuba, in Pinar del Rio, actually Mantua, Pinar del Rio, which is probably the last place that you can step foot on the west coast of Cuba, which is really exciting. And came from a family that had very humble beginnings, really strong working culture, obviously working the land, maintaining a farm. And on my father's side, had been entrepreneurs in the pharmaceutical industry, primarily owning and creating pharmacies. And after the revolution in Cuba, a lot of their lives changed, some for the better, some for the worse. But that's where I grew up. That's the context in which I really started to get educated and understand the world. At around 12 years old, which would have been 1998, my family... actually, I should say it was in 1992. My father had made a decision based on observations of how life was really changing in Cuba to try to make it to the United States. And so on a trip, he essentially crossed the border into the U.S. And at the time, there was the policy of wet foot, dry foot for Cuban citizens that were coming into the United States and was able to get political asylum, which extended to his nuclear family in Havana, which is my mother, my brother, and I. And after about 6 years, we were able to join him in Miami, where we reconvened as a family in 1998 when I was the age of 12, and kind of restarted life, if that makes any sense, which is really... and I remember the moment of stepping off the plane, kind of getting to Miami airport. It was a completely different place than anything I had ever experienced up until that moment. You don't really travel a ton when you're in Cuba, per se. Mm-hmm. Certainly not outside of the country. And, you know, I still have a really strong memory of see my father and for the first time again. And he had left in 92 when I was barely 6 years old. My brother was 12.
Wow.
So there was a lot of growing up that happened without him. And certainly he was a presence in our lives. I think that period of time was one in which telephony was in, sexual connections between the U.S. and Cuba were not super strong. So prior to really seeing him again for the first time, we had seen him through photos or letters, cards.
Wow. So did you?
Even phone calls.
Yeah, I was going to say, did you have phone calls?
We did. I remember. I have this. It's funny because I think looking back as an adult, it's interesting to see what you remember as a kid. Nothing else. But I have a strong memory of my mother talking to a Canadian operator through essentially like a phone system that we had created, and that operator being our connection to our dad. And so what would happen is, because there wasn't a line that he could call from the U.S. to Cuba directly, I think this was very early on, like in the mid 90s, I would say. Mm-hmm. My mom would talk to this woman who was essentially the middle ground between the two of them. So they would talk to her, and then she would tell each other what they were saying. And that happened, I think, at least once, maybe a few times. But I remember it being such an odd thing that our father was talking through this other Canadian woman who was able to, thankfully translate, because obviously we didn't speak English at the time. So, it's a memory that has stuck with me. I wonder how much of it is, myth and lore that you come up with as a kid. But something to certainly talk to my parents about to see how much of it was real. And it was just a completely different way of growing up. So for all intents and purposes, we grew up in a single family home with a lot of support from our father, and then ultimately came back together as a unit when we were 12 and 18. And then, kind of built a whole new life in the U.S. And so I think to your point regarding Harvard, I have always been a bookworm. And so in this new environment of the U.S., my escape mechanism, for better or worse, was to double down on school. And I was very lucky to find teachers, even in my ESOL program, which is English for, folks, essentially it's an English teaching class for those folks that don't speak English as their first language. But even there, I found teachers in middle school and later in high school who believed in the potential that I had, and who really invested in pushing me forward or putting me into programs that enable me to really understand everything that I was just partaking in. So everything about the school system and what classes were there and what it meant to take honor classes and what were the resources that would bring to me. And so I got very lucky with that investment. Ultimately, I qualified into a gifted program at my high school. And through that program, really had an opportunity to, take all the classes that I think as a bookworm, you wish you have the opportunity to do, right? Whether it's advanced literature or advanced math, whatever the case may be. And really through that experience, also met a teacher who was really invested in creating a speech and debate team in my high school. And, I'd been in the country maybe 2-3 years before I really started high school. And I decided that was a good idea. So I signed up and started doing speech and debate when I'm 100% confident my accent was someone could not be
understood.
Really.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So learn by fire, if nothing else, really how to speak, how to structure arguments, how to discuss important topics that were really critical for me, even growing up, right? Because at the time, some of the topics that we were talking about were about the Non-Proliferation Treaty and overall politics, how you create a government. Having come up in Cuba, that was always an interest to me. So through all that experience, I think I was able to see a path for myself. And my senior year, I actually had learned a little bit about Wellesley and loved the idea of going to a school that was so invested in women and making paths for women that other programs had not really seen as early on as Wellesley did. And when I looked at their application process, it was a little bit limiting in the first round. So I decided to try to apply to Harvard and to really expand to other schools in that area. And ended up getting very lucky and got in early, which, I think to me that was a pinnacle of what I had been trying to accomplish through my own education in the U.S., but also in many ways what my parents were trying to accomplish in bringing us here. And so I took that opportunity and, eventually went to Harvard, took every risk that I could take. Some worked well, some didn't, but certainly learned quite a bit in that journey. And since then, have really been very intentional about the types of teams and the types of people, the types of growth and learning that I invest in. And so after Harvard, went to the New England Patriots, where I worked for a few years, and then really decided that I wanted to learn more about running a business holistically and about managing people and helping people to achieve the best that they can through management. So was able to go to the Stanford Graduate School of Business, after which I joined a small startup, which was really invested in creating amazing technology for small businesses. And that startup was acquired by Salesforce, which is where I am today.
Oh, wow. Wow. I can feel when I met you, I totally can feel that you are for women and for, small businesses and helping those be better. Tell me what is your message to helping women? What is your goal like to help them empower themselves and women in general, but maybe predominantly like women in the workplace? What would be your message?
Absolutely. I think women are just incredible.
Yeah.
And I think the strongest example of that is probably my mom. And it's funny because I can't hold it together enough to tell her this. So I guess I'll tell you and maybe she'll listen to it. But, I think my mom raised us with such a strong example of resilience and just being able to manage with the circumstances and roll with the punches as they came, right? And a lot of that came from having a really strong foundation of values and a strong support network, which is primarily our family when we were growing up. And obviously our dad was here in the U.S. So I think to me, that example has always been there. And in many ways, a lot of the things that I have done in my career, in many ways, I mean, I don't even know how else to say this. It's really following that example. It's not, I don't see it necessarily as breaking ground, even though in many ways, I have been lucky to have those opportunities as well. I think for women and what I learned even at an early age, there's three things that I think connect very much to the Lean In message, but have been very pivotal for me. And I actually share this during my talk at the Lean In conference. I think the first thing is I find that in my experience, many women that I either have managed or have interacted with or have worked very closely with sometimes shy away from the opportunity. Mm-hmm. And what I would say is try every time. And I think that's super important because you never know what you're going to learn and you never know if you're going to find the best career, the best project, the best new teammate, whatever the case may be, until you actually go through the motions of really understanding what the opportunity looks like. And in many ways, that means sign up for it. Like, in my case, it was send an application to Harvard, send an application to Stanford, right? Go and meet people at a conference and see if there's opportunities there, which is really how I found the New England Patriots role. I think in every one of those steps that I've taken, it was always about having the confidence at a minimum to give it a try, which I think is really critical. And the second thing that I would say is, as you're doing that, really be conscious and intentional about the team around you. Mm-hmm. And it's all really about the people who are going to support you and help you to achieve what you set out to do and vice versa. So for me, the team, and which is something that we used to say at that small startup that I mentioned, is really, really important. And I've been very lucky to work with incredibly smart, passionate people who are still, I'm lucky to call personal friends today, across each of those opportunities. And then finally, I think it's a very, it's a derivative message to a certain extent of the two things that I just mentioned, but it's really about leaning into the unknown. And so when I say try again, especially if it's an unknown set of circumstances, often in the unknown, there's a lot more opportunity to be creative and to set a new standard, to set a new bar. And I find that women have this really incredible capacity to be conscious of many more risks, and kind of really connecting the dots and really thinking holistically and cross-functionally and collaboratively. And in many ways, some of those unknown circumstances is really about that. It's about defining how to connect the dots in a way that you can accelerate further, or how to solve a problem that no one has been able to solve. And oftentimes it takes more than one person. And I think that's a skill that women really have. And so those would be my three messages. Try every time, the team, lean into the unknown.
I love that. And I do remember that you said, when you mentioned try the unknown, and I want to ask you, what are some of the unknowns that you're facing today, either professionally or personally?
Yeah, it's actually interesting. I think I've been on this incredible career path, and in many ways helped to build the team around me. I recently joined the Salesforce Essentials team here at Salesforce, which is a new and exciting business unit that's focused on basically the small business customers that we have here at Salesforce. Mm-hmm. And we're really thinking about how to make it easy for small businesses to get started and to grow with Salesforce. And I'm working with a whole new cast of really talented teammates. So I think a lot of that is unknown to me, right? Meaning I'm really focused on making an impact and really helping to drive this business. But in many ways, we're testing things and really helping to discover new ways to support small businesses here. So I think that's the biggest challenge that I think I have in front of me, and I'm super excited about it. It's such an amazing opportunity. So I'm thrilled to be part of the team. I think on the personal side, the most recent challenge that I've had, for better or worse, is I have become a foster mom to a puppy. And I call him a puppy because he's actually 11 years old. And what I mean by that is my boyfriend has had this dog for a number of years. He's been actively traveling the last several days. So I've been very much taking care of him. His name is Hunter, by myself. And that's a whole new thing that I've never done ever before. So it's been a really interesting way to kind of discover that part of our relationship and kind of take a little bit more ownership for Hunter, which is also very exciting for me.
Yeah, I think that with pets, I think we learn something about ourselves that we didn't know when we were interacting with pets. I think that's, they're just so, forgiving and sweet. And for most of them. Yeah.
The unconditional love keeps them coming. And I'm, bathing in it. It's been a really cool experience. Funny, so many of my teammates here own pets, but I've never actually had a pet. When I was very young, I was very allergic, and I think my parents kind of shied away from it. So it's a whole new world over here, which is very exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I did want to talk a little bit about what you said to your mom, because I totally think that is something that is near and dear to my heart. I was raised by a single mom as well. And my dad was in the Air Force. And so she, kept the home going, and then pretty much, they ended up divorcing, and she raised me alone, and it just, her resilience, I was like, wow, you just kept going, and I'm sure your mom, there were times probably where she just, was exhausted and emotionally and physically.
Totally.
And thought, can I keep going?
I just don't have I frankly don't have a memory of seeing her kind of at her wit's end. And so that to me is exactly what you're saying, right? It's these women that can just carry the world on their shoulders. And they're almost like, they're little ducks, everything calm on the top. And as you're running in the bottom, swimming in the bottom. And so I think for me, that's something that I aspire to do, and to be able to, impart onto the folks that I work with, or, in the future to my own family.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's great. Well, Rosie, tell me a day in the life. What do you do on a typical day from start to finish?
From start to finish. Okay. Well, these days I'm walking a dog at 6 a.m. in the morning.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, me too.
So, I'm typically an early riser. Try to be up and about around 6 a.m. Again, if I just take yesterday, for example, that meant taking out the dog, making sure that he's happy and fed and has plenty of water. I check in, obviously, with loved ones in the morning. Primarily, I'm working at this stage. And then I go into work, and I try to get a hold of my inbox as early in the day as I can. But one of the things I've been doing lately is that I've been listening to the New York Times Daily podcast, get a sense of what's happening in the world, and get a better sense of opinions that are really bringing the story to life. So try to do that in my commute, get in, check email for any critical items. And then most recently have been spending quite a bit of time in planning meetings to understand, how we're changing things that we're doing in the future, and how we're setting up our teams for success to also grow here at Salesforce. And so has been a really exciting few days of a diversity of topics on my calendar. And by nature, so I'm focused more on the customer experience side of Salesforce Essentials, which what I was going to say is in its nature, it's a fairly cross-functional role. So that means that I'm in and out of meetings with strategy and ops, marketing, design, product, recruiting, you name it. I'm very, very lucky that I'm able to connect with so many different types of amazing teammates and professionals here. So I do a lot of context switching, which is something that I've learned how to manage a lot more in recent years. I try to pause for coffee and lunch. And in fact, I have a policy of trying to do at least one coffee meeting a day, just so that we can change the environment and can kind of walk around and be in a different mood, and really try to talk about different types of topics on those walks.
You mean you go outside and walk?
Yeah, I try to go outside. We're lucky that we have some coffee shops directly in our buildings too. So even going to a different floor and just sitting down and having a cup of coffee is always helpful to take conversations in just a different direction, I find, than a conference room. At the end of the day, I typically try to get a workout in. If I cannot, then I try to run one or two errands. But the one thing that never misses is that I have a conversation with my mom. We
every single day?
Every day. Every
wow.
day. Yes, I agree with that.
That's awesome.
It's fantastic. It's something that, it's actually related to Harvard. When I got in and my parents really started to understand what that meant when I was 17 years old, my father and I had a verbal agreement that I would have to talk to them every day. That's like how they felt comfortable about me going away.
Wow.
And so from that moment, and what would have been, the fall 2007, when I really left Miami, I talked to my parents at least once a day. I can count on my two hands, the number of opportunities that we haven't spoken, or at least exchanged one text message with one of them. And it's typically, things are going well. How are things over there? It's a very minimal check-in, but the continuity of it is something that I think is very unique. And I've had to call them from all over the world, whether I was in China or Mexico, whatever the case may be. We find a way to dial each other to make sure that they know that I'm safe and that they have a sense of what I'm doing. And I think in many ways, it's helped them to also understand the scope and the opportunity that they've really provided me in coming here.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to try to implement that with my son as he's going away to college next year, but I don't know if I'll be as successful.
I can tell you, there's times when I really love it. There's times when I forget, I get really disappointed. There's times when I'm just rushing around and it feels like it's another chore. But at the end, when I step back and really think about what it means that I get to talk to my mom and hear her voice every day. And I'm so aware that that's not something that many people can do. And anyway, I'm very grateful that she pushes me down that line, even if I lose sense of time and don't really dial myself.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I love that. That's awesome. What are you loving these days as far as something that is helping you or making your life easier?
Yeah. So there's a few things. I mean, I think I find that I'm very heads down when I get into the office and get to work. And so sometimes, and in many ways, I'm talking about technology all day, which is really exciting. It's a career that I've been lucky to have chosen, and to a certain extent, it's chosen me back, which is nice. But sometimes I miss, I miss knowing a little bit more about other topics in the world. When I went to college, my education was really in government and politics and international affairs. I even studied French at Harvard, and I don't get enough of that in my day-to-day. So I think of the things that I'm loving, I've already mentioned one, but it's really having the capability to listen to podcasts to really learn about what's happening in the world and to get a broader understanding of some of the news headlines that we've been seeing. And I think it's just been a tough time to distill what's true and what's not true and what's opinion. So I appreciate having things like the New York Times Daily podcast or other types of podcasts to really try to understand the details of the stories that are coming across. So I'm loving that. It's something that I've really enjoyed, and I've gotten into even further. By the way, I'll say that I think it's incredibly critical for anyone in this world to continue to be informed about all the things that are happening out there. It's so important to have a voice. And, I realize that this particular podcast may not be what everyone listens to, but it's a start. And if there are any other recommendations, I typically try to test them out to see what I'm learning, which is really incredible. Mm-hmm. I've really gotten into Netflix documentaries and food shows.
Oh, yes.
And it's a way for me to truly unplug. And most recently, have been watching Chef's Table and have been watching, there's a new show that's called, oh my gosh, I'm going to forget the name, but it's something like Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat. And it's all about how all of these essentially parts of creating a meal really influence taste and the experience that you have with food. And I love that story. And really love how all of those pieces kind of come together to have this very unique result that so many people in the world enjoy. So been really, really focused on that. And then finally, it's funny that we were talking a little bit before the podcast about what you do on a day-to-day basis, but most recently I've gotten a really amazing opportunity here with my team to work with a professional coach. And so have started to really dig into my own personal development now that I'm at this stage in my career in terms of leading teams that are a little bit bigger and really starting to chart out what the next steps of my professional growth look like. So I've always, having gone to Stanford, having been the beneficiary of so many amazing mentors, teachers, people who really invested in me, I truly believe in asking for help and getting help from others in the good times and in the bad times. And I'm very excited to dig into even more, personal goals and really to chart that path with her. So I'm thrilled for that.
Yeah, I love, as a coach, and I have my own coach too. I think everyone should just, and at different times of in your career and in your life, do you need a coach? Just, you could just take that time to reflect and have it basically come back to you and say, oh, well, that's not really how I wanted my life to go, and this is what I wanted to do, and just a kind of a time to do the reset button sometimes even too, and just go, hey,
100%.
Yeah, I wanted to go this way. Yeah.
I'm in total agreement. I think one of the other aspects that I talked about at the Lean In conference is around this concept of resilience and grit. And so much about resilience and grit is to be able to look back at your own journey and try to understand how things worked out and what things you expected, what things you didn't, what did you learn through that process, how did it make you stronger, and really distilling those messages or unique opportunities that got you closer to where you wanted to go. But a huge requirement of that is taking the time to really understand that path. And I think in this busy world today, we're just go, and on to the next. And I'm very grateful for this opportunity to work with someone that's going to push me to pause and to really get more feedback from folks around me so that I have a better understanding of how I'm landing, what are the things that I'm doing that makes them successful, how can I change to even double down on that. So I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, I love that. And even just doing it every 5 years, I say to my clients, is that you need a checkup about every 5 years to kind of do that pause and reflect and see, are you still wanting, to go down this path? What did that look like? And because sometimes we end up going a certain career path or whatever, and we're like, oh, this isn't really fulfilling what I wanted to do, ultimately. So let's kind of, change the trajectory. And yeah, I love that.
Totally.
That's awesome.
So those are my 3 things that I'm loving right now.
Yeah. What is your favorite app on your phone?
I really love Pocket.
Oh, what's that? Pocket?
Pocket is, it's like the pant, the pocket in your pants or in your dress. It's just called Pocket. It's actually an app that helps you. I've been using this app for years, and every time that I use it, the value of it is so clear. As a reader of a number of different things, I find articles that are super interesting to my career all the time, as well as articles of things that I'm just generally curious about. And I always found it really hard to keep a running list of the inventory of all these articles that I wanted to get to if I don't have time throughout the day. And so Pocket is actually both a mobile app and a Chrome extension. And what ends up happening when you download it and you install it is that anytime that you're on an article, whether it's your favorite publication or something that somebody has sent to you or something that you just discover on the web, you can click the button in the browser on your desktop and it will save that article into your Pocket.
No way.
This Pocket has a running list of all the things that you've basically saved.
This is going to change my world.
It's amazing. You can read it on the web, or you can read it in your mobile app, and basically you kind of check off articles as you go. So you can consider it being like almost like a read later library of sorts. And I would say that they're doing a really terrific job. Or at least I'm enjoying this. They send out a newsletter of their top reads across all of the subscribers and some ideas about new articles as well. And so you can see some of the long reads that folks have been most engaged with and really learn about their community. Anyway, I love it. It's incredibly elegant as a mobile application. It's super intuitive. I think I just saw that they may have a way for you to even have those, to have like an audio way, like have a way for you to be able to listen to the articles that you have saved.
Oh, I like that.
I'm not 100% sure how it works yet. I just discovered it, but I overall really, really love the application.
I'm totally doing that today because I end up reading something, finding something, and I'm like, I got to save this, but I can't, how am I going to do that? So I usually send it to myself, from my phone as I'm reading, and then it just gets lost in my email, and, it just takes up space. I would love that. That is going to rock my world. I think that's going to be awesome. I'm going to do that today.
Yeah, I strongly advise it. I think it's incredibly, it's so intuitive. I mean, it's exactly the use case that we all find. Sometimes you say things on Facebook or on Twitter or whatever the case may be, or you text it to yourself. This is just a place where you can hold all of those things, which is really powerful.
That is great. So as a reader, what are you reading these days?
So I just started Brené Brown's Dare to Lead, Brave Work, Tough Conversations, and Whole Hearts. It's one of her newest books. And I feel very connected to how she thinks about leadership. I mean, she says something to the effect of, she talks a lot about courage and vulnerability in general. That's kind of her background. But I think she starts to make it super actionable for managers and leaders that want to bring those learnings into their workspace. So she has this quote, actually, I pulled it out knowing that this might be a question we're going to talk about, but the quote that has really connected with me is, the courage to be vulnerable is not about winning or losing, it's about the courage to show up when you can't predict or control the outcome. And to me, that's very similar to some of these messages that, as I distill or as I think through my own career and the things that have made me successful, it very much aligns with her message, and I strongly believe in it. So really excited to have this, to learn a little bit more about what it means to be vulnerable and what it means to be courageous at work, but also to have some amazing reminders through literature, which has been really good. So definitely digging into that book, hoping to complete it soon. Then I'm going, and then I think on a regular basis, and Pocket is one of these applications that I use all the time. But another one that I use is the Daily Skim. And I actually interact more with their newsletter. And so they send out a review of essentially world events that may be really important. They have a really unique voice that's very fresh and modern. And so I read that newsletter too on a very, very regular basis.
I've heard of that, and I keep forgetting to get that. That's a good one. Yeah. It's
they also
easy
have
to
an
read. Oh, that's great. Perfect. Perfect.
Super easy to do it.
Well, one last question, Rosie. What is your favorite city to visit anywhere in the world?
Well, I will say that I have not gone to Nashville yet. So that's something that I should, that might change my entire list.
You've got to come. You'll have to call me when you do. I'll show you all
absolutely
around.
I would love it. My favorite city, I did a lot of learning when I studied abroad in Paris. And so it's not just because it's Paris and it's a great city, but I would say it's also the place where I felt very independent. And having just kind of gone to college at Harvard, I kind of broke away from my family and I took this big leap and went and studied abroad for a semester. And I almost did the same thing that I had done when I got to the U.S. again. I learned a whole new language, kind of threw myself into the culture, tried to learn as much as I could. And so I have a very deep place in my heart for that city, because I think for me, it represents not just how beautiful it is and how much art and history you can find there, but also my own personal experience and growth when I was there. So it's definitely at the top of my list. I really do love New York and Boston. And I think Boston in particular has it's home. I lived there for almost 10 years during a time when I felt more like myself and was really understanding. It was really going on the path of understanding what type of adult I wanted to be, what were my values. And, those winters would certainly help you accelerate that learning. So I really love Boston and always get really emotional and happy whenever I'm there, because I was very lucky to live there and to be surrounded by amazing people. And I just love the energy of New York. I mean, it just doesn't, it's unlike anything else. Every other city I've ever been to really shuts down. New York has no comparison when it comes to having just this energy that's ongoing. And I feel it every time that I go there and visit with friends from the East Coast. So I would say those are my top three, not just one, all top three, until obviously I go to Nashville.
Yes, you'll have to come. Well, thank you so much, Rosie, for coming on and sharing your stories and what is important. And I love all of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Wow, Rosie has so much wisdom to share with us, and I was so encouraged to jump in and reach higher for my goals. I hope that you have enjoyed this podcast. Make sure that you are subscribed so you don't miss any more episodes. Coming up next month, we are interviewing two very influential women. We have Rachel Cargill, who is creating resources around race and womanhood, and Marcy Walker from the Instagram account Black Coffee with White Friends. I can't wait for you all to hear these interviews, especially this next month when we are celebrating Black History Month. I really think that you will enjoy both of these interviews on Rising Stories podcast. So make sure you're subscribed. Make sure that you don't miss any episodes. And next week, I'll have another Friday Favorites. So thanks so much for listening, and keep rising in your story.